In the deep stillness of night, the towns and cities of Earth slept under a dark sky that had always been safe and quiet. Yet this night, something began to change in ways no one could explain. Strange lights appeared high above in the distance, first small and faint, then growing brighter and closer, their colors shifting from white to blue to a strange pulsing red that seemed to hum through the air. People in New York, London, Beijing, and dozens of other great cities stepped outside into the cool night air to stare upward in confusion and awe. No one knew if this was a celebration or a warning. There had been no news alert, no sound of approaching jets, only these strange glowing shapes drifting silently above the tallest buildings. Some thought of fireworks, some thought of northern lights, but deep down, even the most hopeful minds felt a cold pull of unease. The lights moved with a strange precision, never wavering, never flickering. They slid across the heavens, as if guided by some unseen hand. They arranged themselves in vast lines and circles above each city, their glow reflecting off glass towers and rippling rivers. It was as if the sky had been claimed by something alien, something patient and deliberate. Children clung to their parents' legs, phones lit up across the globe as videos streamed to social media. The world watched, but no one spoke louder. Then a whisper, as though raising a voice might draw the attention of whatever this was, and still there was no sound from above, not a roar, not a rumble, only the deep hum in the air that vibrated faintly in every chest. Then the truth began to show. The lights were not simply shapes in the sky. They were massive machines, ships larger than any human structure, hanging in the air without wings or engines. Their surfaces shimmered with dark metallic plates that seemed alive, each plate shifting and locking into new shapes, as if the ship were breathing. Beams of pale light extended from their undersides, sweeping across the cities like the gaze of some giant eye. The beams passed over buildings and streets, over crowds and cars, scanning everything without pause. It was not beautiful like fireworks. It was cold, methodical, the way a predator studies prey. In government offices across the world, alarms sounded. Men and women in uniforms rushed to command rooms. Orders were given and repeated, but the ships ignored every signal, every warning, every attempt to communicate. Fighters scrambled into the air, but the alien craft made no move to fight back, nor to flee. They simply continued their slow scanning, their beams sliding across the land like fingers searching for something unseen. Missiles were armed, yet those in power hesitated, for every weapon locked on target. The alien ships carried no visible weapons, and yet there was an unshakable feeling that one wrong move would unleash something no human defense could stop. The scanning beams grew stronger, more focused. Some passed straight through walls and rooftops, leaving a faint shimmer as they went. Others stopped and lingered over certain buildings, as if curious above the noise of confused crowds. The air still carried that low hum that now seemed to echo in bones and teeth. People began to feel lightheaded, some dropping to their knees, others clutching their heads, as if the hum carried more than sound. Perhaps it was a signal, perhaps it was the first part of something far worse. No one could say for certain. In a quiet small town far from the skyscrapers and wide streets of the cities, the night had begun peacefully. A soft breeze rustled through the trees, and the houses slept in darkness until the glow appeared here, too, spilling over the hills and shining across rooftops. 14-year-old Lila sat in her room, scrolling on her phone, when she noticed the light creeping across her window frame. She stepped outside barefoot into the cool grass and tilted her head. Skyward above her, the stars had vanished, replaced by a vast shadow ringed with shifting colors. Her breath caught as she realized the shape was moving, and it was blocking out half the sky. Lila raised her phone, her hands shaking as she began recording the strange craft. Her screen showed the alien ship's surface in far more detail than her eyes could catch. It was covered in lines and marks that moved like streams of liquid metal, flowing and twisting around one another. The scanning beam passed over the forest behind her house, making the trees seem almost transparent. For a second, she could see shapes within the trunks, like hidden veins or patterns not meant for human eyes. She whispered to herself, "This is real. This is not a dream." Then the ship slowed its movement until it hung still above her home. The scanning beam stopped roaming and focused directly on her. The pale light bathed her In an icy glow, she felt its weight pressing down on her skin, and into her chest her breath came shallow, yet she could not move. Her phone continued to record her face pale. In the strange light, the hum in the air grew louder until it seemed to drown out her own thoughts. In the corner of her eye, she saw the shapes on the ship's surface moving, faster, rearranging into patterns that seemed almost like symbols or words. Yet she could not read them. She knew, without understanding how, that something had noticed her specifically. Inside the ship, unseen by human eyes, figures moved in a control chamber lit by deep blue light. Tall and thin, their bodies covered in smooth armor. Like living stone, they leaned over strange controls, their eyes fixed on the image of the human girl. Below, one figure tilted its head, as if in curiosity. Another reached out and touched a crystal panel, sending a ripple of light across the chamber. The hum outside deepened, and a faint whisper like the edge of language brushed against Lila's mind. Her knees trembled, but she did not run. She only stared up at the vast thing that had chosen her out of all the humans in sight. Above her, the beam brightened until it was almost blinding. Her phone's camera struggled to adjust, the recording breaking into bursts of light and shadow. Somewhere in the distance, dogs barked and people shouted, but the sound was far away inside her own head. It was as if she stood alone in a silent, frozen world. Then the beam dimmed slightly, and a new sound joined the hum, a deep, thrumming rhythm, like a heartbeat, but not her own. The sound came from the ship, pulsing in slow, steady beats that seemed to match the symbols moving across its surface. She realized it was not scanning her anymore. It was watching her, waiting for something from her. Her phone slipped from her fingers into the grass, still recording the strange glow above her eyes. Locked on the alien ship, unable to look away, she felt a cold shiver run down her spine, as if the air around her had been replaced by something thicker, heavier. The beam flickered once, and the hum deepened again. Her thoughts swirled in fear and wonder, and one single question rose above all others. Why her? Why this night? Why now? Before she could think of an answer, the ground trembled softly, as if something massive had shifted far above her head. The ship's symbols froze, the hum stopped, and the silence that followed felt heavier than any sound she had ever known. The ship hovered above the small town with a sound like deep thunder, trapped inside a closed room, and everyone felt the vibration in their bones, as if the air itself was trembling. And the teenager with the phone stood frozen, her hands shaking, but she did not stop recording, because something inside told her that this moment would change everything. And then from the ship, a beam of pale blue light fell straight to the ground, covering her house and the road and the trees, with a glow that made the shadows dance and twist in strange shapes. Her parents ran outside, calling her name, their voices filled with fear, but the sound seemed to fade under the heavy hum of the ship above, and the blue light did not burn, yet it felt cold on the skin, like touching ice without pain. And then she noticed that her phone screen was flickering, lines of strange symbols appearing for a second before vanishing, as if the ship was reaching into her device, searching for something. In the city far away, the governments were still sending messages to each other, their leaders speaking in rushed voices, trying to understand why the ships were here and why they ignored every missile, every fighter jet, every defense system, and all reports said the same thing: the ships did not attack yet, but they scanned everything. They scanned buildings, cars, streets, people, and even the air itself. Back in the small town, the teenager's father tried to pull her away from the light, but it was like an invisible wall held her in place. She could move her arms and legs, yet she could not step outside the glow. Her breath came in sharp, quick gasps as she looked up into the blinding light above, and then she saw them, shapes moving inside the ship like shadows, walking behind a curtain, tall, thin figures with long arms and heads that were too narrow and high for any human, and their eyes glowed faintly, even through the light. A sound echoed her mind, not through her ears, but inside her head, and it was not words at first. It was a low rhythm, like a slow heartbeat, and then came the voice, cold and curious, saying, "You're different." And she tried to speak, but her voice did not come out. The words stuck in her throat, and only her thoughts moved, and she thought, "Who are you? And why are you here?" And the voice answered, "We came to see what hides inside you." Her parents shouted and waved, and the neighbors had gathered at the edge of the street, some filming, some praying, some just staring with wide eyes, and one man ran to his car, trying to start it, but the engine refused to turn, and even the lights in the houses began to dim until the whole street was only lit by the pale blue glow. Inside the ship, more shadows appeared, and the voice in her head grew sharper, saying, "We do not want your land, we do not want your water, we want to know how you survive." And she thought survive what? And the voice said the coming storm, and before she could ask what storm, a second beam of light shot out from the ship, scanning the rest of the town, sweeping over the roofs and fields and forests beyond like a giant eye looking for something. The teenager felt her knees weaken as the cold grew stronger. The light seemed to wrap around her chest, making it hard to breathe, and in the corner of her vision, she saw one of the shadow figures raising a long, thin arm, as if pointing at her, and then the voice whispered in her mind, "You'll be the first," and she felt a sudden rush of heat in her veins like fire spreading through her blood, yet there was no pain, only a strange strength, as if her body was waking up from a long sleep. Far above, in orbit, other ships hung over other cities, and the same blue beams fell on streets and people and buildings, each one searching, each one choosing someone, though no one knew why. And on the news screens around the world, the images showed the same pattern, silent, hovering, scanning, and ignoring every weapon sent against them. The teenager's phone now showed no symbols, no flicker, only a frozen image of her own face lit by the glow, and in the image her eyes looked brighter, almost glowing like the eyes of the shadows in the ship, and she did not understand, but she felt that something inside her had changed. Then the blue light blinked once like a flash of lightning, and the beam lifted away, the invisible wall vanished, and she stumbled forward into her father's arms, gasping for breath, and the ship began to rise slowly higher into the night sky, but it did not leave. Instead, it stayed just above the clouds, watching, waiting. Her mother asked, "What happened? What did they do to you?" And she shook her head, saying nothing, but inside her heart raced, because she knew it was not nothing. Something had been given or taken, and she could feel it in every beat of her heart. In the command rooms, far away, generals argued with scientists, and scientists argued with politicians, and all the while the ship stayed silent. Above the cities, the world was trapped between fear and wonder. No one dared to attack again, because nothing worked. No one dared to run, because there was nowhere to hide. The teenager stood in her yard, looking at the fading glow on the ground, feeling the strange warmth still in her chest. And when she looked up, she saw the ship tilt slightly, as if it was looking back at her, and the voice returned in her mind, softer now, saying, "The storm comes soon, be ready." And before she could ask what that meant, the voice was gone. The night grew colder, the lights in the houses came back one by one, and the neighbors began to speak in low voices, some swearing they saw the figures in the ship, others saying it was all tricks of a light, and her parents led her inside, locking the doors, though locks meant nothing to ships like that. She lay in her bed later, unable to sleep, her phone still frozen on that image of her glowing eyes, and she felt the warmth spread again, this time down her arms and into her hands, and in the darkness of her room, a faint light shone from her fingertips like tiny sparks dancing in the air, and she whispered to herself that she could not tell anyone, not yet. Outside, above the clouds, the ship still waited, unmoving, as if guarding something, as if protecting its choice, and in the silent sky over the whole world, millions looked up, knowing this was only the beginning and that nothing would ever be the same again. The night air was heavy with the hum of the alien ship above the small town, and every light in the house flickered, as if the ship itself was draining the energy from the ground below. The teenager, named Lila, stood frozen in her yard, her phone still in her hand, recording every second of the strange scene. She could hear her heart pounding in her ears, but she could not stop watching as a thin beam of pale blue light came down from the ship and touched the ground. Right beside her house, the grass began to ripple like water in a pond, and the beam spread out in a slow circle, covering the yard, the street, and part of the neighbor's field. Inside her house, her father was shouting for her to come inside, but his voice sounded far away, muffled by the deep thrumming noise the ship made. It was not a normal sound. It seemed to sink into the bones and make every part of the body vibrate. Lila could feel in her chest, and teeth her phone screen shook in her hands as she kept filming. Then the beam began to rise inch by inch, scanning her from her shoes to the top of her head, and she felt a strange warmth run over her skin. It was not burning, but it was not pleasant. Either more like her body was being measured from the inside out, her mind filled with images that were not her own. She saw great metal cities floating among the stars. She saw creatures with eyes like mirrors. She saw battlefields littered with broken ships and the bodies of beings she could not name. She stumbled back, breathing fast, but her legs felt heavy as if the ground itself was holding her down. Above her, the ship made a low sound, almost like a voice speaking in a language she had never heard, yet somehow could almost understand. The words felt cold and sharp in her mind, and she knew whatever it was saying was not friendly. Down the street, other houses were waking up, lights turning on, people stepping out into their yards, but no one dared come closer to the beam. They stood at a distance, whispering and pointing, their faces pale. In the blue light, Lila could see their fear reflected back at her, and for a moment she felt more alone than she ever had in her life. The ship above her shifted its position slightly, and the beam narrowed, focusing directly on her face. Her phone slipped from her hand and hit the ground, the screen still glowing as it captured her wide eyes, staring upward. Then a sudden pulse of light flashed, so bright she had to shut her eyes tight, and when she opened them again, she was no longer standing in her yard. She was inside a massive open space with walls that curved in ways that made her dizzy. The floor was smooth and black, reflecting a faint light from somewhere high above. The air smelled strange, like metal, and something sweet she could not name. In front of her stood three figures, tall and thin, with skin like glass filled with moving colors. Their faces were blank, yet somehow she could feel their attention on her like the heat of the sun on bare skin. One of them raised a long hand, and a shimmering panel appeared in the air between them. It showed her standing in her yard only moments ago, her father in the doorway, shouting her name, the neighbors in the street, and the great ship above. But the panel also showed other images, her face overlaid with strange shapes and numbers, her body glowing in red and gold patterns, as if they were looking inside her and seeing something she did not understand. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Her throat felt tight, and her mind was buzzing with questions and fear. The three figures turned to each other, and a series of deep musical notes filled the air. It was their language, and she could feel each sound like a vibration inside her head. Then the middle figure stepped closer and placed a cold hand on her forehead. Her vision went white, and the floor seemed to disappear under her. When she could see again, she was floating in a dark place filled with countless points of light like stars. But she knew these were not stars, they were worlds, each one glowing a different color. And she could sense life on them. She could feel war and peace, joy and pain all at once. It was too much, and she gasped, trying to pull away, but the figure's hand held her still. Then she saw Earth, small and blue among the lights, but around it were dark shapes moving closer like a swarm of shadows. She could feel the danger in them, like the chill of deep water. The figure's voice finally spoke in her mind, clear and direct. The war is coming here, and you are part of what they want. Before she could ask what that meant, the vision shattered, and she was back in the black room, the three figures standing exactly where they had been. The middle one lowered its hand, and the panel in the air went dark. Then they turned away from her, speaking again in that deep musical language, ignoring her, as if she were no more important than a tool they had finished using. But Lila was not ready to be forgotten. She stepped forward, demanding to know what they meant by part of what they want. Her voice cracked, but she did not stop. She told them to send her home or explain why they had taken her. Yet the figures did not turn to her. Instead, a new sound filled the air, a sharp, high tone that made her ears ache. The walls around them began to ripple like water, and a thin doorway of light opened behind her. Without warning, the floor tilted, and she was pulled backward toward the doorway. She reached out, trying to grab onto something, but there was nothing solid to hold. She fell through the light and landed hard on the ground. She was back in her yard, the blue beam fading, the ship above her rising into the night sky, the hum growing softer until it was gone. Her father was running toward her, his face pale, his hands shaking as he grabbed her shoulders. She could see neighbors still in the street, staring up at the now empty sky. She tried to tell them what had happened, where she had been, what she had seen, but the words stuck in her throat, because deep down she knew no one would believe her, and even if they did, she was not sure she believed it herself. Somewhere far above the earth, the alien ship joined others, drifting silently among the stars, and in the black room, the three figures looked at the glowing panel once more. This time, it showed not just her, but millions of humans, each one glowing in red and gold patterns. The middle figure spoke one slow note, that echoed through the space, and the other two nodded in silent agreement. The war was coming, and humanity was no longer just a planet in their way. Humanity was now something the galaxy would fear or destroy. The air above the small town was heavy with a strange hum as the alien ship remained in place like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike, and the teenager, named Mia, stood frozen in her backyard, her phone still raised toward the sky, though her hands shook so much that the image on the screen blurred, and swayed. Her eyes were locked on the underside of the vessel, which was covered in patterns of shifting lights that moved like flowing water glowing in colors she had never seen before, and could not name. Even the crickets and night birds had gone silent, as if the entire world was holding its breath, watching what would happen next. And far away in the darkness, the rumble of engines could be heard as military vehicles rushed toward the town, their lights flickering through the trees. But Mia barely noticed, because the strange hum from above was no longer just a sound. It was something she could feel pressing inside her chest and head, making her thoughts slow and heavy. She stumbled back a step, her knees weak and her vision swimming. But before she could fall, the hum changed to a deep pulsing vibration, and the lights on the underside of the ship rearranged themselves into a perfect circle that began to spin slowly, sending beams of pale blue light outward across the ground and over the houses. The light touched her like cold rain seeping into her skin, and she gasped, trying to breathe, but finding it harder with every second. She wanted to scream for her parents, but when she turned toward the house, she saw them standing in the doorway, staring up at the ship with wide glassy eyes, their faces blank as if they were dreaming. The spinning light grew faster and brighter until it lit up the entire street, revealing neighbors stepping out of their homes, drawn toward the ship like sleepwalkers, their movements slow and unsteady, as if something was pulling them from within. The air itself felt charged like the moment before a lightning strike, and Mia's heart pounded in her ears as she fought to stay still, to resist the strange pull. But she could feel it creeping into her thoughts, whispering to her mind in a language she could not understand. Above her, the alien ship shifted slightly, and for a brief moment, she caught sight of shapes moving behind the translucent panels of its lower hull, tall, thin figures with elongated limbs and glowing eyes that scanned the ground like predators measuring their prey. She had never seen anything alive move like that, the way their heads tilted in sharp mechanical angles, the way their fingers spread and curled, as if testing the air itself. She felt their attention focus on her like a weight pressing down, and suddenly the circle of light on the ground expanded until it surrounded her house and part of the street. The humming turned into a steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat, but deeper and slower, and then the air seemed to ripple as a thin column of light descended from the ship, striking the ground just a few feet from where she stood. The grass beneath it turned black and brittle instantly, and small sparks danced in the air around it. She stumbled back again, her instincts screaming at her to run, but her legs felt heavy, and the pull of the light was growing stronger. The column widened, and a shape began to emerge from it, a tall, alien figure with skin that shimmered like silver metal and eyes that glowed a pale green. Its body was covered in a strange armor that looked grown rather than built, with smooth, curved plates that shifted with every movement it made. It stepped forward, its feet not quite touching the ground, and the hum from the ship seemed to follow it like a living thing. Mia's breath caught as the alien turned its gaze toward her and raised one long hand palm outward. A soft beam of light emerged from its palm, scanning her from head to toe, and she felt it pass through her like a wave of ice, leaving her shivering and dizzy. The alien tilted its head as if puzzled, and then turned its attention to the other people in the street, scanning them one by one before stopping again on Mia, its glowing eyes narrowing slightly. From above, another voice echoed, deep and resonant, vibrating through the air, and the alien in front of her seemed to respond with a series of low clicks and hums. The language was strange, but somehow she could feel the intent behind it, as if the sound carried meaning directly into her mind. She caught flashes of images, bright lights, endless stars, strange landscapes, and towering machines that seemed to stretch beyond sight, and then the images were gone, replaced by the cold reality of the alien standing before her. The figure reached toward her slowly, its long fingers stretching out as if to touch her face, and she felt her heart leap in her throat, but before it could reach her, a sudden roar cut through the night, and the ground shook as something exploded at the edge of town, bright orange fire lighting up the horizon, and the alien turned its head sharply as more explosions followed. The hum of the ship grew louder and more urgent, and the spinning circle of light above began to pulse rapidly, casting long shadows across the street. Mia stumbled back as the alien stepped away from her, its body turning toward the distant blast. The other townspeople seemed to stir slightly, as if waking from a dream, blinking and swaying in confusion. The alien raised both arms, and beams of green light shot upward into the ship, and in an instant the humming deepened into a low rumble that made the ground tremble. Then, without warning, several smaller craft emerged from the underside of the massive ship, each one sleek and sharp with glowing thrusters. They streaked toward the horizon, vanishing into the darkness. At incredible speed, Mia's pulse raced as she realized the explosions must have been from the military forces trying to fight back, and now the aliens were moving to respond. The tall alien turned back to her one last time, its gaze unreadable, and then it stepped backward into the column of light, which drew it upward until it disappeared into the belly of the ship. The column flickered and vanished, leaving only the pale spinning circle above, but even that began to fade as the massive vessel shifted in the air and slowly began to move toward the horizon, following its smaller ships. Mia dropped to her knees, gasping for breath, her phone still clutched in her hand, though the screen had gone dark around. Her neighbors were slowly retreating to their homes, murmuring in confusion, as if unsure why they had come outside at all. Her parents rushed toward her, their faces pale, but filled with fear and relief. She could barely speak, but when she finally looked up into the sky, the ship was a distant shadow against the stars, and she knew it was not gone, not. Really, it was only moving to the next stage of whatever it had come to do. And deep inside, she felt something else, a strange awareness, like a faint echo in her mind, as if part of the alien presence was still with her, watching and waiting for the right moment to return. The ground shook under heavy fire as the alien machines moved closer to the heart of the human defense line. Soldiers screamed orders, while explosions lit the night like an endless storm. The teenager from the small town, now wearing scavenged armor, followed the commander through the wreckage. She had never held a weapon before the war, but now she carried a strange alien rifle taken from a fallen enemy. It felt cold in her hands, yet somehow it hummed like it was alive. The air smelled of smoke and metal as the battle stretched across the ruined city. The alien ships circled above like dark clouds, blocking the stars. Their scanners glowed in shifting colors, each beam moving slowly, as if searching for something specific. They ignored small groups of fighters, focusing instead on large gatherings of people or heavy machinery. It was as if they wanted to break the human spirit before crushing their strength. The commander kept glancing at the sky, muttering about timing and patterns. His voice was low and tense. The teenager stayed close, listening to every word. Suddenly, the ground split open near them, revealing a massive alien walker. Its legs were tall and jointed like an insect. Its head bristled with weapons. It let out a deep mechanical hum as its sensors locked onto the humans nearby. The commander shouted for everyone to scatter, but the walker fired before they could move. The street exploded into flames, sending debris flying through the air. The teenager dove behind a broken wall, coughing from the dust. Through the haze, she saw something strange. The alien walker hesitated. Its sensors flickered rapidly, as if confused. The teenager risked a glance over the rubble and noticed the device on the walker's head sparking wildly. It was not human damage. It looked like interference. The commander noticed it too. His eyes widened, and he pointed toward the building behind them. An old radio tower still stood, half destroyed, but somehow powered. The commander shouted that the tower was jamming the alien systems. Without thinking, the teenager sprinted toward the tower. Bullets and plasma bolts scorched the ground around her. She climbed the twisted metal steps two at a time, her hands shaking, but her mind focused. When she reached the control room, she found a battered radio operator still alive, barely conscious. He told her the tower was broadcasting an old emergency signal, one used in disasters before the war. The aliens must not have expected such low-frequency noise, and their systems were struggling to Adapt, the operator told her, to keep it running no matter what, then collapsed. The teenager gripped the controls as another blast shook the tower. She could see the walker below, firing wildly. But missing every shot, the human soldiers took the chance to surround it, focusing fire on its legs. With each hit, the walker slowed, its weapons flaring less often. Finally, it collapsed into the street, its core burning blue before exploding. The soldiers cheered, but the victory was brief as more alien machines appeared in the distance, their shapes shifting in the haze. The commander called the teenager down. She ran to meet him, but before she could reach him, a deafening sound rolled across the battlefield. It was not an explosion, but a deep, resonating pulse that made her bones ache. The alien ships in the sky seemed to pause, their movements slowed, and the lights on their hulls changed to a dull red. The commander stared upward, his face pale. He whispered that this was not normal. The aliens were changing tactics. Moments later, the ground around them began to ripple like water. Structures buckled, as if the earth itself was twisting. The teenager fell to her knees, struggling to keep balance. Then massive spires of black metal erupted from the ground, each one pulsing with the same dull red light. They rose higher than any building, surrounding the humans in a jagged circle. The commander yelled for retreat, but there was no clear path out. The spires were forming a perimeter, trapping everyone inside. The teenager noticed the same strange hum from the alien rifle she carried. It was louder, now matching the pulse of the spires. She lifted it hesitantly, aiming toward the nearest one. When she pulled the trigger, the rifle did not fire plasma. Instead, it released a narrow beam of light that hit the spire directly. The red glow flickered for a moment, and the hum stuttered. The commander saw it happen and shouted for her to keep firing. She obeyed, hitting the spire again until cracks formed along its surface. But as the first spire crumbled, the others began to react, their pulses speeding up. The ground shook harder, and the sky darkened even more. The alien ships adjusted their positions, forming a perfect circle above the spires. Beams of red light connected them to the ground. Energy began to build between them, forming what looked like a massive dome of shimmering force. The teenager realized too late that they were being sealed inside. Soldiers tried to break through the remaining spires using explosives and heavy weapons, but nothing seemed to slow them down. The teenager felt the rifle heat up in her hands, its hum now almost a scream. She aimed at the largest spire, but before she could fire, the air around her turned heavy like thick water. Her breath became harder to draw, and her vision blurred. She heard the commander shouting, but his voice was distant, as if underwater. Shapes began to appear within the red dome. They were not alien soldiers, but something else, tall, shadowy figures moving with unnatural grace. Their forms shifted constantly, never holding one shape for long. They seemed to step through the air itself, ignoring debris and obstacles. The teenager felt her heart race as one of them turned its head toward her. Its face was a smooth, reflective surface like glass, but deep inside, she thought she saw her own reflection staring back at her, only different. Somehow colder, stronger, and older. The figure raised a hand, and the alien rifle in her grasp grew heavier, almost pulling itself from her grip. She fought to hold it as a strange vibration crawled up her arms. The commander reached her side, firing his weapon at the figure, but the shots passed through as if it was smoke. The figure tilted its head slightly, then stepped closer, the ground beneath it turning black and brittle with each step. The teenager realized this was not a normal enemy. These were something the aliens had kept hidden until now, something they only released when the battle reached a point they could not control. She tightened her grip on the rifle, even as her arms burned from the weight. The figure stopped just a few steps away, lowering its hand and tilting its head again, as if studying her. Then, without warning, it spoke in a voice that echoed in her mind, not her ears. It told her that the war was not about planets or people, but about something inside her species, something they could not allow to spread. The commander pulled her back, shouting for retreat, but before they could move, the ground erupted between them, sending both sprawling into the dirt. The figure stepped into the dust cloud, vanishing from sight, leaving only the sound of the dome's pulse growing faster and louder. The teenager struggled to her feet, but when she looked around the battlefield, everything was changing. The alien machines were withdrawing, and the shadowy figures were taking their place. She realized then that the real war was only just beginning. The air was thick with heat and smoke As the human forces prepared their final stand against the alien machines, the skies above were still heavy with enemy ships, their metallic shadows stretching over the ruined cities. The rivers ran black with ash, and the streets were covered in rubble. But in the middle of all this destruction, there was something new moving among the ruins, something the aliens had never seen before. Humans were changing. They were not just fighting with guns and rockets anymore. They were moving faster, hitting harder, surviving wounds that should have ended them. It began days ago after the strange blue light had swept over the human camp. Soldiers who had been injured rose to their feet, stronger than before, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They could see the enemy before the enemy could see them. They could hear the hum of alien engines miles away and could smell the faint metallic scent of the machines in the wind. Even unarmed, they could strike with enough force to break steel plating the scientists hiding. Deep underground whispered about rapid evolution or forced adaptation. Others called it a gift from Earth itself, as if the planet had finally decided to fight back through its people. The aliens noticed the change too. Their scanning beams lingered longer on the battlefields. Their machines started moving with hesitation for the first time. The once perfect formations began to break apart as they tested these new humans. Some of the alien warlords thought it was a trick. They believed humans had simply found better weapons. But soon they realized this was something deeper. Something in the human bodies was shifting, making them dangerous in ways the aliens could not measure. In the middle of a burned city, Captain Mara led a small unit through the ruins. Her team had no heavy weapons, only rifles and blades scavenged from destroyed enemy drones. But that was enough now. She moved like the wind, weaving between collapsed buildings, her breath steady, her steps silent. Every soldier in her squad shared the same glow in their eyes and the same fire in their blood. They did not need orders to move together. They simply knew where the others would be, as if their minds were linked. An alien war machine the size of a building turned its cannons toward them, its armor shining under the pale moonlight. Once a threat like this would have ended them in moments. Now it was different. Mara sprinted forward, dodging the energy blast that shattered the ground. She leapt onto the side of the machine, her fingers gripping the metal as if it were soft earth. She climbed faster than the alien gunner could react, and with one strike she drove her blade deep into its core. A blinding light burst out as the machine fell silent, crashing to the ground in a cloud of dust. Far above the battlefield, in the command ship of the alien fleet, the High Commander stood before a massive display showing the fighting below. He watched humans tear through machines that had been designed to crush entire worlds. His advisors spoke in urgent tones, saying this was impossible. No species had ever adapted in the middle of a war at such speed. The commander narrowed his eyes and ordered more data to be collected. He wanted prisoners alive, not just bodies. He wanted to see this new human evolution up close. Back on the ground, Mara and her squad regrouped, their breathing still calm despite the chaos around them. They moved toward the old city center, where a massive alien drilling device had begun cutting into the earth. The ground shook with every turn of its claws. Smoke rose from the streets as alien soldiers poured in to guard it. The humans approached without fear. The enemy fired, but they dodged as if they knew where every shot would land. Mara signaled her team, and they split into pairs, circling the enemy from both sides. The fight was brutal and fast. Alien soldiers swung their energy blades, but the humans blocked with impossible speed. Every movement was sharper, every strike more precise. Soon the drilling machine was exposed, and one soldier leapt onto it, tearing open its side with bare hands. The energy inside spilled out like liquid fire, and the machine exploded in a wave of heat. The blast knocked down nearby buildings, but the humans stood unharmed, their bodies glowing brighter for a moment, as if feeding on the energy itself. In the underground lab, scientists watched the battlefields with awe and fear. They whispered about the danger of this transformation. If it continued, there would be no going back. Humans would no longer be the same species they had always been, and no one knew what that would mean for the future. But in the war above, there was no time for fear. There was only survival and victory. The alien High Commander grew restless. His fleet had lost more machines in the past day than in the entire first month of the war. He ordered a direct assault, not with drones or automated units, but with their own elite warriors, beings who had conquered dozens of worlds without defeat. They descended from the sky like falling stars, their armor black and their weapons glowing red, they landed in the heart of the city where Mara and her squad waited. The two forces stared at each other in silence, the air between them heavy with tension. Then one alien charged forward, moving with inhuman speed, but Mara was faster. She caught the alien's blade in her hand, sparks flew, but her grip held firm, her eyes locked with the alien's cold gaze. Before she twisted the weapon free and struck the alien down, the others roared and attacked, but the humans met them head on, each clash sending shockwaves through the streets. The battle was fierce, and neither side held back. Hours passed, and the fighting spread through the ruins. The ground shook, the air burned with heat, and the sky lit up with explosions. Finally, as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the remaining aliens retreated, their armor scorched, their weapons broken. They left behind the bodies of their fallen and the ruins of their machines. Mara and her squad stood among the wreckage, their breathing calm, their eyes still glowing. Somewhere in the distance, a low hum began to rise, the sound of more ships arriving. The war was not over, and the enemy was not finished. But something had changed forever. The humans no longer felt like prey. They felt like predators. The world had shifted, and there was no turning back. Mara looked to the sky, her mind clear, her heart steady. She knew they would keep coming, and she knew they would keep fighting, because now they were more than human. They were something new, something the galaxy had never seen before and maybe never should have. The sun had barely risen over the ruined city when the sound came like a storm rolling across the skies. The alien ships gathered again, their dark forms blotting out the morning light. The humans waited below, tired but ready, their eyes still glowing faintly from the transformation that had spread through their blood and bones. Captain Mara stood at the front of the line, her breath steady, her mind sharp. She knew this battle would decide everything. The enemy was no longer just machines or shadowy figures, but a force hungry to erase what humanity had become, a force that feared the power growing inside every human heart. The sky cracked open as hundreds of ships descended like a wave ready to crush the world beneath them. The ground trembled under the weight of their engines, and the air filled with the roar of distant thunder. Mara looked at her team, their faces set with determination. They had fought through hell and come out stronger, their bodies moving with speed and strength no soldier had ever dreamed possible. The humans had become something new, born of war, pain, and a fierce will to survive. The alien commanders watched from their ships, wondering how this fragile species had grown into a threat that could challenge their vast empire. As the ships landed, the ground cracked, and the air burned with energy. Waves rippled across the battlefield, turning dust into glass. The transformed humans moved like shadows, weaving between explosions, their weapons glowing with a strange light that matched the glow in their eyes. They struck fast and vanished faster, their movements a blur that confused even the most advanced alien sensors. Mara charged forward, leading the first wave. She swung her blade with deadly grace, cutting through enemy lines, her squad moving as one unit, each member perfectly in sync with the others, their strength and speed amplified by the change that pulsed within them. A soldier beside her caught an alien blast with his bare hand, crushing the weapon with a growl before driving his fist into the enemy's chest. The alien commanders unleashed their elite warriors, the beings who had never lost a battle, their armor black as night, their weapons burning with red fire. They charged like gods, descending from the stars. The humans met them head on. The clash was thunderous, sparks flying as metal met enhanced flesh. The ground shook with every blow, and the air was thick with the cries of the dying. Mara faced the lead warrior, her eyes locking with the glowing red lenses of the alien helmet. She moved faster than thought, leaping over blasts and cutting with precise strikes. Each blow aimed to disable, not just kill. She could feel the power in her limbs, the change coursing like electricity through her veins, and the warrior responded with strength and skill matched only by desperation. The battle stretched across the ruined city like a living storm. The sky darkened with smoke and fire. The humans pushed forward, their numbers growing as more transformed soldiers joined the fight. They moved with a purpose, not just to survive, but to claim their place in the galaxy. The alien ships began to fall one by one, their engines stuttering and dying as the humans tore through their ranks. Suddenly, a wave of energy burst from the largest alien ship, sending shockwaves that knocked humans and aliens alike off their feet. The ground cracked, and a dark shadow rose from the depths of the ship, a creature larger than any building, its eyes burning like molten fire, its roar shaking the very air. The transformed humans hesitated, but Mara did not. She rallied her team, charging at the beast with every ounce of strength. The fight was brutal and long. The creature struck with massive claws that could crush steel, its breath of flame that melted armor, but the humans dodged with unnatural speed, striking at the glowing spots on its body. The creature howled in rage, each hit weakening it, until finally Mara plunged her blade deep into its heart. The beast collapsed, a mountain of burning flesh and metal. With the creature defeated, the alien ships began to retreat, their commanders signaling a withdrawal. The transformed humans stood victorious, their eyes still glowing, but their hearts calm. The war had changed them forever. They were no longer just defenders of Earth, but warriors of a new dawn. Mara looked to the horizon, her breath steady, her mind clear. She knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast and filled with dangers, but now humanity had become something more, something to be feared and respected. They would rise among the stars and claim their place, no longer primitive, no longer prey, but masters of their fate. The sun broke through the smoke, casting light on the battlefield. And for the first time in a long while, the humans smiled, knowing that the war had brought them transformation and the future was theirs to shape.